sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. My name is Virginia Jones. I'm a stand-up comedian, but my sister's a therapist.
Hi, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also Virginia Jones's sister, my main credit.
You know, we talk a lot, and that's part of what this podcast is, the things that we've been talking about. But I also talk about you a lot because I like to pretend that I'm a therapist, right?
Yes.
Unpaid, totally uncredited. Take everything I say with a massive grain of salt, right?
I think it's going to be more than a grain. I'd say like a few tablespoons.
It's a shaker of salt. But I find myself, and that's why the podcast is named this. I find myself saying my sister's a therapist all the time. And then people who listen to podcasts are like, really? Is she? I didn't know that. You hadn't mentioned that.
We were talking about this earlier. Every person I interact with at some point says, oh, you have a podcast?
I hadn't heard about that.
I'm like, oh, this is reminding me of the podcast. As we've said before, all roads lead to this podcast.
All roads lead to Rome. Laura, this week is your topic. What are we talking about this week?
This week, we're talking about lying.
So lying, that's an interesting topic. It's something everybody does.
One of my big data sets comes from a book that I really enjoy called Everybody Lies. Big data, new data, and what the internet can tell us about who we really are. Here's a fun fact. This was written by Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. So basically what they do in this book is they look at Google results. And because Google results are a huge data set. Mm-hmm. And you don't realize this when you're Googling, but somebody can access your Google. It may not say Virginia Jones looked up turkey trots 2020, but it's going to show up that you did do a search for turkey trots in the California area in this year.
And someone who Googled what is Prince Nelson's middle name also Googled, am I going blind?
Here's some statistics that you may not know. They were confused about Trump and like why he performed well anywhere. But this is what they found. Silver noticed that the areas where Trump performed best made for an odd map. Trump performed well in parts of the Northeast and industrial Midwest, as well as the South. He probably performed notably worse out West. Silver looked for variables to try to explain this map. Was it unemployment? Was it religion? Was it gun ownership? Was it rates of immigration? Was it opposition to Obama? So what's your guess?
Well, one thing that I know is that it's college education.
I think that's one correlative value. The single factor that best correlated with Donald Trump's support in the Republican primaries was all of those people looked up the N-word.
Now, is it just like, what does it mean?
No, it just says Google searches for N-word, just the word.
What are people looking for when they Google that word?
I guess you're trying to figure out how to spell it correctly. I don't know. I guess if I'm interested in a topic, so like Hawaii, I probably would just put Hawaii and then I can find everything out about Hawaii. So you can find out everything about the N-word if you look it up, apparently.
Amazing.
The place where lying comes in is that, if you asked any of these individuals on the street, they would never tell you, I'm from Delaware, I looked up the N-word, and I'm voting for Trump. They would tell you that they voted for Trump because he's a businessman, because he has traditional values, because he's going to make America great again. They would not tell you that it was their explicit racism that was driving them to the polls. So some other places where people lie. People are 7 times more likely to ask Google whether they'll regret not having kids than having them. But this is the worst part. But after making their decision, adults with children are 4 times more likely than those without children to tell Google that they regret their decision.
Google really does know a lot.
Yes.
But that's not dishonesty. If you're searching, should I have kids? Should I not have kids? That's not a lie.
No, but it's kind of surprising because I don't think anyone would admit to that in public.
Right. Well, if you asked a new parent, have you ever Googled, am I going to regret not having kids?
Do you ever wonder if you would regret this decision? They will never tell you that.
Right.
I mean, I would, but most people are not that. Okay.
I had never Googled, am I going to regret not having kids?
Well, because it was never a question. This is for people who are on the fence. But also, people would never tell you that they were on the fence.
No.
If you went out and face-to-face spoke to people, they would tell you having a baby was the best decision they'd ever made. They never had a doubt about it, and it was so easy, and it's been a great experience.
Non-stop pleasure.
Exactly. For every search women make about a partner's phallus, men make roughly 170 searches about their own phallus.
A lot of DQs.
Insecure dudes. A lot of insecure dudes.
Yeah.
Here's something about women and phalluses. 40% of complaints about a partner's penis size are that it is too big on the internet.
See, guys, that's not the most important thing. That's not the end all be all of relationships.
This one ties into a previous episode. Parents are 2.5 times more likely to ask Google if their son is gifted and talented versus their daughter.
Interesting.
Disappointing, America.
You have to keep in mind that women are dumb.
Well, at young ages, girls have larger vocabularies and are 9% more likely to be in the gifted program. Speaking of girls, parents Google, "Is my daughter overweight?" twice as frequently as they do for their sons. And they're 3 times more likely to ask if their daughter, rather than their son, is ugly.
Oh, wow. Why does Google know if your kid's ugly?
If you had your photo, say, "Is this child ugly?"
Is this kid like Google their name? Say, hey, is Virginia Jones a dog face?
Is this personal photo of my daughter revealing of an ugly child?
Mention of hot or not on which the whole internet was based.
This is why I love the book Everybody Lies, because everybody does lie. No one would ever admit to that.
Right. Yes.
If they did, they would be a sociopath. So according to Don Martin on TikTok, you follow him, right? You said you saw him somewhere. He has the kind of light blue eyes and blonde hair, and he's kind of dreamy looking.
I saw him at the Improv Christmas party, and he's just as dreamy looking in person.
Well, he said people lie about everything. They lie even when the lie doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Even when it's just about what their favorite fast food is, they'll lie to you. They'll still lie to you a piece of paper. Like, so if people are doing random studies by themselves, they're filling out the paper by themselves, no one's observing them, they're still lying.
Mhm.
Why, he says? Because people want to be thought of as this more ideal version of themselves, the version that you would think better of, or the person that they wish that they were, rather than the person that they think they actually are.
One of my constant lies is just a numbers lie. If it's money that I'm getting, I'm rounding up. If it's money that I'm spending, I'm rounding down for no reason. I am the boss of my own domain, but I always want to be slightly more ahead.
I really struggle to hold on to numbers. So I think a lot of times when I'm retelling a story, I am lying, but I'm not aware. And I think sometimes
it's not deliberate.
Right. It's not deliberate. But I think sometimes to make the story more interesting, I will inflate a number of something because it makes it more funny.
For sure.
Have you heard of the religious worship attendance in America study?
Wow, Laura, thank you for asking me that. People ask me that all the time. And what's weird is that I haven't.
Well, Don Martin referenced it in his TikTok. So I went and looked it up. It's by Devin Pope. The whole title is Religious Worship Attendance in America, Evidence from Cell Phone Data. About 22% of Americans say that they regularly attend religious services weekly.
Right. And we know that that is not accurate.
How do you know? Are you there?
Because I have driven by the brunch places on Sunday and they're jam-packed.
A lot of them are buying cigarettes and a lot of them are at the gym, actually, statistically. This guy was able to use over 2 million points of data from cell phone GPS location data. And he found out that only around 5% of people are actually attending religious services because he was able to track whether the cell phone was in the vicinity of some religious center, a church, synagogue. It was tracked for 10 months. It stopped. This is mysterious. In February of 2020.
People stopped going places in February 2020. I wonder where that is.
I don't know. It's just going to be a mystery.
It is hard to find time to go to church when you got to work out and get cigarettes.
Approximately 60% of never attenders go to the tobacco store at least once during the sample. So yes, 22% of people claim to attend worship services at least weekly. However, only 5% of the cell phone sample attended at least 36 out of the 47 weeks of the year. Because he was also accounting for like if they're, illnesses or out of town.
I think that kind of lie, on the one hand, it is to make other people think better of you. But I also think a kind of lie we tell when it's a goal. Like, this is the person I want to be. I want to be someone who goes to church.
I want to be someone who regularly goes to the gym.
We've had this conversation when you're new in dating and relationships and someone tells you something that just does not bear out.
Real gym rat.
I'm a real gym rat. I love camping. I had a guy who was like, I really don't like sweet stuff. The sweetest thing I'll have is like a cinnamon raisin bagel. And then 2 months later, he's like eating cakes and cookies all the time. I'm like, what was that about bagels? And he said, that's who I want to be. when you're first meeting someone, it's like going to a new school and you have this opportunity to reinvent yourself in the form that you want. So you can say, I go to church all the time and I never smoke cigarettes.
Absolutely. When in fact, the reverse is true.
You're just smoking cigarettes in the parking lot of a church.
7 ways to get the truth on surveys. Jason Mamudovic. So he talks a lot about lying on data surveys.
It's an anonymous survey, one presumes. It's not going to come back to you. But in order to tell the truth, you would have to admit it to yourself, right?
Well, I think also sometimes the things we're admitting to are not very pleasant. So we're going to talk about some survey data. Social desirability bias is the term used for when people underreport or lie on surveys because they want to look good, even though the surveys are anonymous. This is extremely common. About a third of the time, people lie in real life. We also lie to ourselves. Teenagers often just lie on surveys to mess with the survey information. People have no incentive to tell the truth on surveys. The more impersonal the conditions, the more honest people will be. An internet survey is better than a phone survey, which is better than an in-person survey. Have you ever done a survey?
I believe I have, yes.
Did you lie?
I feel sure that in the surveys that I've taken, I will move more to one side more than the other side. Recently, I took a personality test, but I had to consciously think, no one's looking at this. This is just for me and I want a good result. So I'm really, I have to take an extra step to say, I'm going to be 100% honest, like to the best of my ability on this thing.
Yes. It's difficult to not lie. I mean, if somebody asks me about my vegetable intake, like whenever I go to the doctor, I always lie.
Yeah.
I'm flossing 15 times a week.
When I was still drinking, my doctor would say, like, how many alcoholic drinks do you have in a week? And the truth would be like 10, 15. But I said it once and I saw the look on his face. So then I was like, 2.
Yeah, people don't think 15 is good. I always know that when an alcoholic is filling out the survey for me, obviously you're coming to me because you have a drinking problem, because why else would you want to quit drinking and need a hypnotist to help you with that? I assume whatever they're telling me is probably triple that. Psychology Today made an article about it by Equihagen. Here's the most common reasons people lie: to avoid feeling judged or shame. Mine, avoiding punishment. That's a big one for me because, that's why I lie at the doctor, because I don't want anyone to go, what? To protect themselves from retaliation. This one I've experienced with you as a teenager for no good reason, e.g., compulsive lying.
I remember a time when I was lying a lot in middle school. And it was a hard time. Our parents were splitting up. I'd gone from having a mom that made me lunches to making my own lunches. And sometimes they were random. That was a time when I was really telling a lot of lies to my peers about my family life, what it was like. And that it was a lot of that we were very rich and fancy because we were in a super richy rich school. A thing that I did was my dad's girlfriend had sushi. She had nori sheets. And at one point, I melted cheese in them and rolled them up. And I told people that that's how you ate seaweed.
In that case, you were correct.
This is what sushi is. It's just melted cheese inside of seaweed.
So I think that I'm not going to say I never lie. I absolutely do lie. But I think my perspective of always be honest, always tell the truth, I think that came from my mother's alcoholic family. Because mom, she was raised by a drug addicted narcissist,
right,
and an alcohol addicted, probably also a narcissist. I never met him, so I can't say. And their whole thing, keeping up appearances, making it okay. And her mother was constantly lying to everybody about everything that happened. And so my mother decided she was going to 180 that and tell everyone everything that ever happened all the time and never lie about anything, which is problematic.
When I was little, I thought my mother was the most popular woman on earth, that she just had friends wherever she went. Checkout line at the grocery store, she was buying Pepto-Bismol or something and telling another woman about how I had diarrhea. She must be very close friends with this woman to be sharing my illness.
Personal, private details.
This week, I am packing for a big move. One of my projects was my mother, for unknown reasons, sent me all of her photo albums about 10 years ago. It was actually right when I was leaving my marital household, and it was a strange thing to receive. I've been looking through these albums and I know all of her stories. And so there's this adorable picture of my mom dressed up like a cowgirl, sitting on a pony. But I know the story about her father coming home drunk with a pony or a donkey.
I think it was a miniature pony.
And it was so sad looking at this picture that's adorable.
Right. You're like, this is so cute. How did this moment happen?
But I know it came out of this chaos story about her alcoholic dad but it's very much a demonstration of public versus private, right? Like there's this cute image that came out of a chaotic story.
So I'm sure that if we were going to interview the original Virginia Corcoran, she would tell you, oh, we had this wonderful party in our backyard and Bill showed up with a tiny horse and Donna just, hopped on the back. Isn't that delightful?
That's so fun. Right.
Not my husband was drunk and gambling all night, and this was one of his wins.
When my grandma Ginny died, when she passed, one of the things my mother found in her house was a diary where she was keeping a record of especially her husband coming home at night, because if it was a good night, he would park in the driveway. And if it was a bad night, the car would be in the ditch or the car would be in the street. And then my grandma would have to get up in the middle of the night and repark his car so that no one knew that he was out driving drunk.
This desperate need to keep up appearances made our mom go completely the opposite direction.
My mother is very concerned with the publicity photos that we use for this podcast and that they might be edited.
No way.
And just this week she said, and I saw the arm and I knew that wasn't your arm because it was too firm. And I said, Mom, it's very kind of you. She really wanted to tell me about my fat arms.
So yeah, to present themselves in a positive way, that's what Virginia was doing. Actually, both Virginias. To obtain rewards, that's another reason people lie. Due to carelessness and impulsiveness. To experience pleasure from deceiving others. That's more of our sociopathic friends.
There's a comedian named Steve Rannazzisi. He'd been a stand-up for a long time, but after 9/11, he started talking about how he worked in the Twin Towers. The story grew to he escaped the Twin Towers, and he had all these details, and everyone wanted to hear the story, and he told it on every podcast. He told it all the time. And finally, someone fact-checked it and said, you were nowhere near there. And
you were living in California at the time.
I mean, it was something that it was plausible. It could have happened. He was in New York at the time, but for whatever reason, he wasn't at work that day and he didn't have anything to do with it. But everybody made fun of him, and he's still a working comic. But for a couple of years, he had this kind of like shade over him because he told this enormous lie over and over again. But I had a lot of empathy because I know what it is to tell a fantastic story and you tweak it and people like it even better and you tweak it again and then you get really quite far away from the truth. Well, I understand how it happens.
Right. I mean, that's what happened with the news anchor Brian Williams, right?
Right. Well, Brian Williams was the one he was a combat journalist, right? But the story he told that was not true was what?
In 2015, NBC news anchor Brian Williams admitted to lying about being on a helicopter that was shot down by enemy fire while covering the Iraq War in 2003.
It's plausible. He was there.
He was in a helicopter. He just wasn't in the one that got shot down.
Certainly, he talked to people whose friends and comrades had been shot down. He just kind of like brought those things together.
Right.
And that's a lie.
And I think that it's kind of a two-parter. Part of it is that the human mind does not store information well. This is a sieve. It does not take photographs. It takes weird outlines of things. And I think when you retell a story enough times, it changes a little bit every time. And I think, maybe he was enjoying the attention and
shock and awe,
embellishing a little bit. And then I think his brain was changing the story as it happened.
One thing that I understand to be true is that when you tell the same lie a bunch of times, your brain starts to feel that it's true. How Billie Holiday, who was definitely known for the song Strange Fruit, at one point she started claiming that she wrote it and she did not. But she identified so much with the song and it was so much a part of her persona that she started to believe that it was true.
Right. I mean, that song actually kind of ruined her career, if we're honest.
Right. It's not a party song.
So some other reasons people lie is with the aim of keeping personal information secret for pro-social reasons to make others and oneself happy, like telling a child that Santa Claus is real. Unfortunately, if there are children listening, got some news for you. Also for altruistic reasons to protect others from harm. I've definitely done that.
Our mother, again, has no compulsion towards. If she sees the opportunity to say something that probably will hurt your feelings, guess what? Your feelings getting hurt.
Well, it's the truth. Truth hurts.
Now, my sister Laura, who is a very sensitive and empathetic person, you did go through a phase in college and maybe right after college where you were Laura Unvarnished Truth Ryan.
That was a lot of how I perceived myself too. I was like,
And
I'm tough and I tell the truth.
It
I think
was-
that actually started in high school. I really do think that was like a direct reaction to our father. You know, he lied all the time. He had affairs. He lied to us. He withheld information. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be like him. And I also decided I'm tired of being the nice child who's accommodating and, you know, kind to her parents all the time. She's done with that. She moved on. She started doing some other stuff.
Yeah, it was incredibly aggravating to know you then. And also, reality in some ways is subjective. Like the thing that you think is true about me or the things I do, as the dude says, that's just like your opinion, man, you know? And it's being brutally honest is not better than being a total liar.
It's just different. Both ways hurt people, right? So I think if your main goal is to not hurt people, it's better to find a place in between.
Right.
Absolutely lying all the time or telling absolutely everyone the truth all the time.
I think when we talk about lying and like social niceties, a big thing that comes up is like white lies, things that we think of as harmless. Oh, did you enjoy the pudding? Or do I look fat in these pants?
Or did you like that Robin Thicke album by the same name?
Americans do a lot of that. And when we come up against other cultures that are more brutally honest, it can be really upsetting. Like Germans will tell you that the pudding was bad and that your butt is too big.
The French will also do that.
A big culture shock thing, and also, you know, misogyny. I started traveling in Asia for business a lot. Item one, I'm the tallest lady they've ever seen, but I'm also one of the bigger ladies they've ever seen. And I kept having these conversations just asking me about being fat and how I got fat. And a woman asked me, have you always been fat? And I said, no, I used to be a baby. Like I was very small coming out into the world.
Technically, babies are kind of fat.
Babies are chubby, but they're 8 pounds. Like if I could get back down to my birth weight, my God, all my problems would be done.
Well, because you wouldn't be alive anymore.
I would just be ahead. No compunction about talking about your body, about your personal life. Like Asia's just all over it.
You know, this is why people don't trust Americans because we are liars. I think we have as many terrible thoughts as everyone else. We just don't tell anybody what they are except Google. So there was a sample done with 257 people. This is where the most common reasons people lie study. About 1/3 of the participants told 3 to 7 lies a week. The majority of these people claimed to tell 2 or few lies a week.
4 to 7 a week? Like, come on.
So are you saying that that's low? I was going to say you probably tell 4 to 7 a minute. Regarding lies told in the past 6 months, most people report lying for the altruistic, 64% reasons, or secretive reasons, 60%. About half lied to avoid being negatively evaluated, 43% for pro-social reasons, and 40% to avoid being punished. A smaller portion claimed that they lied to present themselves in a positive light, 37%, or to gain a reward, 21%, protect themselves due to impulsiveness or carelessness, or just because they enjoyed conning people, 9% of the people
just say, I love lying. It's the best. The problem that I discovered with that kind of lie, that just kind of fun adventure lie, is that later you have to remember.
You got to keep up to it. Was that when you went into the burning hospital and saved the baby?
That baby was saved.
So as far as motivation is concerned, lying and deception is not always malicious, immoral, or unethical. Bella DePaulo, PhD at the University of Virginia, has confirmed that lying is simply a condition of life. In her research, she found that both men and women lie in approximately 1/5 of their social exchanges lasting 10 or more minutes. Wow. And over the course of a week, we deceive about 30% of people we have in one-on-one interactions. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it all the time.
So women are more likely to tell altruistic lies to avoid hurting people's feelings, and men are more likely to lie to themselves.
I feel that is true.
Men apparently lie more often to impress. Typical conversation between 2 men contains about 8 times as many self-oriented lies as it does lies about others.
And I wonder, like, all the dating lies, like that's what I'm thinking about is embellishing.
I'm 6'3".
The height embellishment, the job embellishment. We've experienced that. Just, polishing the apple a little bit.
Yeah. I think, well, apparently men are always trying to deceive others to believe that they are better than they are. Christine Comaford wrote an article called Why We Lie and the neuroscience behind it. This is the part that I'm excited about. There are 3 key parts of the brain that are stimulated when we lie. First, the frontal lobe, the neocortex. It's a new part of our brain, which has the ability to suppress truth. Yes, it's capable of dishonesty due to its intellectual role. Second, the limbic system due to anxiety that comes with deception. And yes, when we are lied to, our Spider-Man sense can perk up, just as we can feel guilty or stressed when we're doing the lying. And third, the temporal lobe is involved because it's responsible for retrieving memories and creating mental imagery, the way that Brian Williams' mind did. The anterior singular cortex because it helps monitor errors, and the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex because it's trying all the time to control our behavior. Our brain is busy, busy, busy when we lie. It's far more peaceful when we tell the truth because our limbic system isn't stressed about lying and our frontal lobe isn't inhibiting the truth. Aaron Candola said that a key feature of a pathological lie is that it has no obvious motivation.
Right. There's no reason for it.
So it's usually possible to determine why someone has told a lie, such as to benefit themselves or avoid an embarrassing or stressful social situation. But pathological lying occurs for no reason and does not seem to benefit the individual. Some people who do this are people with factitious disorder. Have you heard of factitious disorder?
No.
Sometimes it's called Munchausen syndrome. It's a condition in which a person acts as though they are physically or mentally ill when they are not. The one that we more hear about in our society is Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So when someone lies about another person having an illness, this condition is most common in mothers who feign illnesses in their children and lie to doctors about it. So why do you think people do that?
Well, I have a friend whose sister does that, and it's really sad, but she's always raising money for her sick child, but she seems to believe that her kid is sick, and they just go to doctor after doctor after doctor, and she's like, none of these doctors can figure it out. Like her mom has diagnosed her as having a brain disease that really doesn't happen to people under 50, and there's just this constant string of ailments, but it's so that she can get attention and she can feel special. Reading a book on Adlerian psychology, and one of the main tenets, especially in childhood, is that everyone wants to feel special. Everyone wants to have a place in society. That's what makes us feel safe. The reason I can tell you that I was lying was that my parents let me know that if I was not special, if I was not exemplary, if I was not having this A+ life, I was not worthy of love. So the Munchausen person has decided that they can't be the prettiest, they can't be the smartest, they can't be the best, but they can be the nuttiest. And the Munchausen by proxy mom, she is
sickest.
Right, or the sickest. Munchausen by proxy mom is getting attention because their kid is the sickest, because they've determined that they don't have like enough of whatever it takes to be special. And you know, people like this who, even if they're not pretending to be incredibly sick, they always have like, I can't have this, or I'm allergic to the sunshine. And like allergies are legitimate, but there always seems to be one person who is more troubled by it than normal people.
Someone who really lays it on thick when they're talking about a head cold that they got. So the causes of factitious disorder are unknown, but here are some theories. There might be biological or genetic causes, childhood abuse and neglect, like you mentioned, low self-esteem, substance abuse, depression, and let's click on back to our friends, the cluster Bs, personality disorders. Pathological lying is a possible symptom of certain personality disorders, including borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, found in where? The cluster B.
Yeah. And see our previous podcast for what is a cluster B and what does that mean? But yes.
What does it all mean? Everything comes back to the same thing. So a person who frequently exaggerates stories to make themselves appear more interesting or consistently lies to cover up mistakes that they have made is unlikely to be pathologically lying. They have clear motives and advanced in particular interests. As a pathological liar, it's not necessarily a recognized condition, and there are no formal treatments for it. But someone who has BPD, NPD, APD, or histrionic personality disorder will probably lie just for the sake of it, right? Because the goal is to get more attention.
Being in comedy, I've known a lot of pathological liars, and it's just a strange feeling when you find out that someone has just lied to you every day of their life. There was a guy in Portland when I was coming up who had come from New York, had been a cop. His father had been a Marine who had taken his own life. I believe his mother was also dead. He told jokes about them, and these were just facts that we all knew about him. And I was coming back to the area to do comedy, and I kind of got to pick my person to work with. I picked this person because I know him and it'll be fun to hang out. And he kind of reiterated all the things, and we talked about his life, and he showed me a tattoo that he'd gotten in memory of his dead Marine dad. And then I went to the next town and I talked to a person about him, and he said, "Oh, you know that none of that is true. His parents are alive and they're from Portland. He was never a cop. He was having his first kid, but really it's his second kid because he had a kid when he was a teenager. None of the primary characteristics of this person were true."
From this seated position as a non-therapist, what is your diagnosis of this man?
Cluster B. And
what are we leaning in the cluster? Do you think it's more of a borderline, or is he giving narcissism, or what do you think?
I would have to say, I think he was a borderline because he didn't strike me as a narc, either covert or overt. Another weird thing about him is, and it's very sad, but he passed away during the pandemic. And he said that he had COVID, and he had also been telling people he had cancer, and he had been raising money for his cancer. And when he died, I was like, wow, I know someone who died of COVID now. I never knew anybody. This is my first one. But his mother made a public statement and said, guys, he died of alcoholism. He never had cancer. He never had COVID. He just drank himself to death. It was a rough time.
So then you had to say, looks like I don't know someone who's died from COVID.
Right. Oh, it was so terrible. And like people started coming for his parents for like the money he'd raised for his fake cancer. And there's nothing, you fell for a pathological liar's ruse. There's nothing you can do. But that was a really weird one. What do you think?
You may have been paying for his liver treatments.
Yeah.
It actually just makes my stomach kind of knot up to hear that story. It's so sad and so gross.
A more fun one is I was on the road. There was a comic.
Virginia knows a lot of liars.
Look, comics are mentally ill. We had a whole podcast about it.
Circle back to Sad Clown if you haven't heard it yet. See, even the podcast is about the podcast.
Yes. It's very meta. A sidebar, I went to a concert recently where Robin Hitchcock was playing Syd Barrett songs. And I was talking to guys in line about Syd Barrett. And one of them said, yeah, he was a real acid casualty. And I said, well, actually, in our podcast, we talked about how you have to have the base problem. It's not organic. It has to come from a tendency you have before. A man got out of line.
That is exacerbated by.
It's exacerbated. Yes. It don't help, but it doesn't cause psychosis. A man heard this, got out of line, and came and talked to me and said, well, actually, my sister's a nurse, and she said it was just acid.
And he said, you know what? My sister's a therapist. So now
let's have a fight.
Sisters have to have a cage match.
So this comic was a Scottish guy, and his whole act was about being a Scotsman in America and haggis and kilts and all these things. We did a show together where he did not do very well. Afterwards, like me and my friend, you want to hang out? Are you okay? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go back to my room, And my friend was like, his accent's weird. Not as weird as my accent. And I understand.
I was going to say, did it sound like the thing that you just did? Because that's not Scottish.
Not good. It's not good. But yeah, my friend was like, his accent's weird. And I said, sometimes when someone's been in the States for a long time, their accent can like spread out. Like Australians can start to sound British to me. I checked in with him the next morning and I'm like, hey, we're headed off to Portland. And he's like, oh, I got to go to the Three Sisters. And then I talked to another friend and they're like, and he's not Scottish at all. I'm like, what do you mean? And to do a character on stage, to do a fake thing, I've seen that. That doesn't bother me. But to do the full prestige where you're just Scottish all the time, honestly freaked me out.
I'm going to go with cluster B on that one. Yeah. It's giving cluster B energy. CBE, you've heard. Well, so
these are two fun compulsive liars.
Well, and interestingly, I recently visited my sister IRL. I was flying home and I decided to watch Muriel's Wedding. Do you remember that film?
I never saw it because I thought it looked too sad.
It is sad, but it's also kind of funny. But I was watching it. What is wrong with her? Because I saw it as a teen. I just thought, oh, she's just quirky. She's just different. So if you haven't seen Muriel's Wedding, basically the plot is that there's this awkward woman from a small town in Australia, played by
the very talented Toni Collette.
Toni Collette, yes, classic. And she just doesn't have a lot going on. She's on the dole. She's doesn't seem particularly bright, but her only goal, which also made me sad, was to marry a man. And so the whole movie, she's pretending that she's engaged. She goes to all these bridal stores and tells them that her mother has brain cancer or something and that she needs photos taken because this was obviously before the cell phone. So she's having them take all these Polaroids and she makes this huge album of photos of her trying on all these dresses. And I thought, wow, this woman is borderline.
Right. She's not a wacky character. She's mentally ill.
Right. And as we hearken back to our episode, Cluster Bees, that's what we talk about. There is no fun, quirky, strange woman. She generally has a personality disorder. And her friend,
or autism.
Well, I was also getting autism vibes from Muriel. She had some stuff going on biochemically as well. Her friend goes to their roommates, and she accidentally kicks this photo album out from under the bed. This woman she's been living with for a year has this photo album full of her posing in wedding dresses.
Okay.
With no groom.
Here's another cluster I know. When I worked at JCPenney, I love your style. There's a girl that I worked with who was always talking about her wedding. She had to leave work early because she had to go meet a DJ or taste a cake or, it was all she talked about. I didn't like her, so I didn't talk to her about it any more than I had to. But she had told me when the wedding was, and I kind of became aware that it was approaching. And so I finally asked her, I'm like, hey, how was that wedding that you were planning for all that time? And she said, oh, I didn't wind up getting married. And I said, what? And she said, well, I told my fiance when the wedding was and that I rented the hall and, ordered a cake and bought a dress. And he said, I don't understand. I didn't ask you to marry me and you didn't ask me to marry you. We are not getting married. I guess she just thought if she just planned it and then said, you just have to show up this day, that he would do it. But in fact, they didn't stay together. If you build it, the groom will come. And I had that same falling backwards feeling that you have when you're dealing with a compulsive liar of just I'm grasping for reality and I can't find it.
Right. It's very tough. I have had the experience in my professional practice where I know that the person who's hired me and is paying me money to help them is actively lying to me. It just makes it's very tough because I always wonder, how am I supposed to help you if I don't know what's going on?
Those lies are probably, they don't want to be judged, but they want help.
But I can't help you if I don't know what's going on. I had a client who I saw him for, I don't know, almost 3 years. And he told me at the very tail end, maybe the last couple months, he's like, hey, I've been drinking 2 bottles of wine every day. Okay.
All right.
So that kind of helps the puzzle pieces to fall together here about why you were experiencing all these problems in your marriage. And I don't know that if you don't tell me a basic information, right? It's tough. In closing, Virginia, what are your final thoughts about lying?
Well, my thoughts are, this has confirmed my suspicion that everybody lies, and the people we lie to the most are ourselves. We want to believe things about ourselves, so we allow them to come out of our mouth. The way to get out of that is going to have to be a lot of self-work and reflection. What are your thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts were, I was actually surprised by how much lying is meant to sort of paper over the cracks and make life easier for people. I was surprised by those statistics. I was also surprised that people lie that much about going to church because everybody knows that you don't go to church. Nobody goes to church anymore. Lying is an interesting thing, and I do think it's true. I think we lie to ourselves about ourselves the most. But all those liars out there, just kind of, let's get it together. Let's try to stop having factitious disorder if you have.
Stop pretending you're married. Stop pretending you are Scottish.
Absolutely stop. If I'm going to pick an accent, it's not going to be the Scottish one. That one's way too hard.
Yeah.
Do one that's North Country or something that no one's really heard.
It's obscure, right? That you can just
do an obscure one.
And your version can be a little bit, you can a little bit wing it.
But everybody knows the Scottish accent, and it's impossible. I can't even understand it. I don't understand how I would pretend to do it. So, Virginia, if anyone wants to catch up with your work or find out more about you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I have a website at www.badinia.com, BADINIA, and that will point you to all kinds of things like my TikTok, which is Badinia, and my Instagram, and if you want to reach out to the podcast specifically about some thoughts you've had, you can write us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. There's also a function where you can text us right through the podcast. If you look at the podcast on Apple, I believe there's a button you can press where you can message us directly. Laura, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me at lauraryan.org. They can also find me on my TikTok account. I am Laura Ryan. If they want to look at other episodes of the podcast and they don't know how to use Apple, Spotify, or the other providers, they can go to our website, mysistersatherapist.com. Also, if you'd like to hire us to speak at your women's conference, mental health conference, women's leadership event, wellness event, women's retreat, educational seminar, corporate event, or workshop, hire us at mysistersatherapist.com. Also, if you're thinking about a women's retreat that we run, let us know what your ideas are on that, because we're thinking about it too.
Laura, now is the time in the podcast where you sometimes will read a review, a listener review, which those are Laura's favorite thing in the world. If you want to give her a birthday present, Christmas present, just write a review of the podcast. That's what she really wants.
You can also send me a review for the Queen's Jubilee. You can send me a review for All Saints Day. I'll take a review for any holiday that you can think of. Yes, in fact, I do have a review. It's by B. Jerwa. It says, warning, may contain actual insight. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll self-realize. That's been my experience anyway. I showed up late to the party, but MSAT went into regular rotation immediately after my first listen. The show is well-paced, thoughtfully prepared, and a real joy to listen to. Sometimes things are funny, and sometimes they get a little heavy. That's how life works, and it's comforting to hear smart people talk about the best and worst ways to get through it all. I've sincerely learned some things about myself from listening to this show. It has at times been more effective than my actual, in quotes, actual therapy session in the same week. Yes, it's because I'm a genius. Plus, the hosts have great taste in media. They do a great job of bringing music, movies, and books in the mix. No dry discussions here. Highly recommend. Thank you, B. Jerwa. That was awesome.
Thank you, B. Jerwa. And for those on the inside track, we are recording this on B. Jerwa's birthday. So a very belated birthday to you.
Happy birthday, B. Jerwa.
To close, we would like to once again reflect on the immortal words of Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn, when he once said, "We can make it, baby."
Me and you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.